June 1944. Normandy hedgerows. Wehrmacht panzers were winning. Every tank ambush cost American lives until Private First Class James R. Mitchell from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, discovered something no tactical manual ever taught, using nothing but broken glass from a farmhouse window. He developed a technique so devastatingly effective that 21 German tanks would burn in those hedgerows over the next 14 days. And Wehrmacht intelligence would never understand why their armor advantage had vanished. June 12, 1944, 0640 hours, Normandy, France. The hedgerows of Normandy were killing American soldiers at a rate that made D-Day's beaches look merciful. Private First Class. James Mitchell crouched in a ditch along Route Nationale 13, watching black smoke rise from what used to be 3 M4 Sherman tanks. The smell wasn't just burning fuel, it was flesh, rubber, and the particular metallic stench of phosphorus ammunition cooking off in a sealed metal coffin. 23 men. Gone in 4 minutes. Mitchell was 22 years old, born in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, drafted in December 1942, trained at Fort Benning, Georgia, and shipped to England in March 1944 with the 29th Infantry Division. He'd survived Omaha Beach 6 days earlier. He'd watched friends drown in surf turned red. He climbed cliffs under machine gun fire. He thought nothing could be worse. He was wrong. The bocage, the ancient hedgerow country of Normandy, was a maze of sunken roads bordered by earthen banks, topped with thick vegetation. Each field was a fortress. Each lane was a death trap, and the Wehrmacht knew every inch of it. German doctrine was simple and devastatingly effective. Let American armor advance into the narrow lanes between hedgerows, then destroy them with Panzerfaust anti-tank weapons or concealed Panzer IV and Tiger tanks firing from prepared positions. The Sherman's 75mm gun couldn't penetrate German heavy armor at range. American tanks had to get close, suicidally close, to have any chance. The mathematics of death were precise. From June 6th to June 11th, 1944, the U.S. First Army lost 347 tanks in the bocage. That was nearly half the armored strength landed on D-Day. Crew survival rates were catastrophic, 68% casualties per destroyed tank. The 743rd Tank Battalion, which landed with 48 Shermans on D-Day, had 31 operational tanks 6 days later. The rest were burning wrecks scattered across Normandy's medieval field systems. Colonel Robert Thompson, commanding the 116th Infantry Regiment attached to the 29th Division, sent a desperate cable to V Corps headquarters on June 10th. Current tactics: suicide against prepared armor positions. German tanks invisible until firing, our armor blind. Require immediate tactical innovation or accept unsustainable casualty rates. American soldiers dying because we're fighting 20th century war with 19th century visibility. Mitchell read that cable pinned to the bulletin board at Battalion HQ the morning of June 12th. He'd volunteered for a reconnaissance patrol specifically because staying in the main advance meant watching more Shermans burn, more tank crews die screaming, more infantry cut down trying to flank German positions they couldn't locate until muzzle flash gave them away. His patrol, 8 men from Baker Company, had been tasked with scouting German positions northeast of St. Lo. They'd found them. 3 Panzer Rifles, concealed in a tree line 800 yards from the main road, perfectly positioned to ambush the next American column. The patrol had withdrawn successfully, radioed coordinates, called in artillery. The Germans had moved before the first shells landed. That was the pattern. Wehrmacht tactical doctrine emphasized mobility and concealment. German tank commanders were trained to fire, displace, and reposition before counter-battery fire could neutralize them. American forward observers could call in devastating artillery barrages, but only if they could provide accurate coordinates. And finding concealed German armor in the bocage was like finding needles in a continent-sized haystack. Mitchell's squad leader, Sergeant Frank Kowalski from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, summarized the problem in language that would never appear in any official after-action report. We're getting our asses handed to us because we can't see the bastards until they start shooting, and by then it's too late. The squad had taken shelter in a partially destroyed farmhouse 400 yards from the main road. The family had fled, probably days ago, judging by the smell of spoiled milk and abandoned bread. Furniture overturned, children's toys scattered. A calendar on the wall stopped at June 3rd. Mitchell sat on the stone floor, back against the wall, holding his M1 Garand rifle across his knees. Through the shattered window, he could see the smoke from the destroyed Shermans drifting across the field. 3 more crews dead, 3 more families receiving telegrams back in places like Detroit, Atlanta, San Antonio. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from rage and helplessness. Sunlight streamed through the broken window, catching fragments of glass scattered across the floor. The fragments threw tiny spots of light across the opposite wall, dancing points of brightness that moved as clouds passed overhead. Mitchell watched those light spots without really thinking about them. His mind was elsewhere, replaying the tank ambush he'd witnessed that morning, the way the 1st Panzer had been completely invisible until it fired. The way the Sherman crew had died without ever knowing where the shot came from. The way... He stopped, looked at the glass fragments, looked at the spots of light on the wall, looked back through the window toward the German lines. Something in his brain, something born of Iowa practicality, American ingenuity, and the desperate creativity that comes from watching too many friends die, made a connection. Sergeant Kowalski noticed Mitchell staring at the broken glass. "What are you looking at, Mitchell?" Mitchell picked up one of the larger fragments, a piece about the size of his palm, triangular with sharp edges. He held it up to the sunlight streaming through the window, angling it until it threw a bright spot of reflected light onto the far wall. "Sergeant," Mitchell said slowly, his Midwestern accent thickening as an idea crystallized in his mind. "How do tankers know where to shoot?" Kowalski frowned. "What? Our tank commanders. How do they identify targets? They look through their periscopes, see the enemy, and fire. Right, but what if they can't see the enemy because the enemy's hidden in the trees? Then they're screwed. That's why we're losing so many tanks." Mitchell moved the glass fragment, making the reflected light spot dance across the wall. "What if we could mark the target for them? What if we could put a bright light, a bright spot, right on the German tank's position? Something the Sherman commander could see through his periscope." Kowalski stared at him. "With what?" Mitchell held up the glass fragment. "With this." The sergeant's expression went from confused to skeptical to thoughtfully intrigued in about 5 seconds. "You want to use broken glass to reflect sunlight onto German tank positions?" "I want to paint them with light," Mitchell said, his voice gaining confidence as the idea solidified. "We get close. Infantry can get close in these hedgerows because we're small and quiet. We find the German position. We use glass fragments to bounce sunlight directly onto the target. The reflection would be visible to our tank commanders hundreds of yards away. They'd know exactly where to shoot." "That's..." Kowalski trailed off. "Crazy! I was going to say brilliant." Mitchell stood up, brushing glass fragments from his uniform. "It might not work. The sun has to be in the right position. The angle has to be right. And we'd have to be close enough to see the target, but far enough not to get killed. So basically," Kowalski said dryly, "exactly what reconnaissance patrols already do, except now you want to turn us into human spotlights. Human spotlights that might save tank crews." Kowalski was silent for a long moment, thinking. Then, "We'd need to test it, prove it works, and even if it does, we'd need to convince Battalion that we're not insane." Mitchell gathered several glass fragments from the floor, wrapped them carefully in a piece of torn curtain, and stuffed the bundle into his musette bag. "Then let's test it." June 13th, 1944. 14:20 hours. Hedgerow country east of Carentan. The first test of Mitchell's glass fragment technique happened entirely by accident, which is how most battlefield innovations actually occur. Baker Company was advancing through a series of hedgerow-lined fields toward a small village called Grain. Intelligence reported German armor in the area, but as usual, intelligence couldn't pinpoint exact locations. The company's attached Sherman tank, call sign Iron Duke, commanded by Lieutenant Marcus Holloway from San Antonio, Texas, was advancing cautiously along a sunken road, with infantry spread in a protective screen 50 to 100 yards ahead. Mitchell's squad was on the right flank when they spotted it, a Panzer IV concealed in a dense tree line, approximately 300 yards ahead, hull-down position, perfectly camouflaged with cut branches and netting. The German crew hadn't spotted the advancing Americans yet. They were watching the main road, where they expected Sherman tanks to appear. Standard procedure would be to radio the position back, call in artillery, and wait. But artillery took time, and time meant the Panzer might displace before the first shells arrived, exactly what had happened a dozen times before. Mitchell pulled out one of the glass fragments from his musette bag. It was 14:20 hours, 2:20 in the afternoon. Sun was in the western sky, slightly behind the American position. Perfect angle. Sergeant Kowalski crawled up beside him. "You're actually going to try this? We've got maybe 3 minutes before that Panzer crew spots Iron Duke on the main road. When they do, they'll fire and Holloway's dead. Or you flash light at them and they shoot you. They won't know where it's coming from. Tank crews have tunnel vision. They're looking through periscopes with limited field of view. They're watching for armor, not for some guy in a hedgerow with broken glass." Mitchell positioned himself carefully, using the hedgerow vegetation as concealment. He angled the glass fragment, catching sunlight, and directed the reflected beam toward the Panzer's position. The spot of light was surprisingly bright, a brilliant point of white illumination that danced across the German tank's camouflage netting. "Radio Iron Duke," Mitchell whispered to Kowalski. "Tell Holloway there's a Panzer at his 2 o'clock 300 yards, marked by reflected light." Kowalski grabbed the SCR 300 backpack radio. "Iron Duke, this is Baker 6 actual. German armor, your 2 o'clock, 300 yards. Target marked by light reflection, confirm visual." Lieutenant Holloway's voice crackled back immediately. "Baker 6, Iron Duke. I see. Jesus Christ, I actually see it. There's a bright spot of light right on the son of a bitch. Confirm that's the target?" "Confirmed, Iron Duke. Panzer IV, concealed position. Engaging." Through his binoculars, Mitchell watched Iron Duke's turret traverse right. The Sherman's 75mm gun elevated slightly. The tank had been moving at a crawl. Now it stopped, stabilized. The German Panzer crew apparently noticed the turret movement because their own gun began traversing, trying to acquire the Sherman first. Tank warfare was about who shot accurately first. Both crews were racing against seconds. Mitchell kept the light reflection steady on the Panzer's position, his hand rock solid despite adrenaline screaming through his nervous system. Iron Duke fired first. The 75mm armor-piercing round hit the Panzer IV in the turret ring, the junction where turret met hull, one of the few vulnerable spots on German armor from frontal aspect. The impact was catastrophic. The Panzer's ammunition cooked off 3 seconds later, blowing the entire turret off the chassis. Black smoke boiled into the afternoon sky. Kowalski lowered the radio handset slowly, staring at Mitchell. "Holy Mary, Mother of God." It worked. Lieutenant Holloway's voice came through the radio again, this time with an audible edge of excited disbelief. "Baker 6, Iron Duke. Target destroyed." "Whatever the hell you just did, that was the clearest shot solution I've ever had in this damn hedgerow country. How did you mark that target?" Mitchell grabbed the radio. "Iron Duke, Baker 6 Echo. Reflected sunlight off glass fragment. We can repeat on additional targets if conditions permit." Silence for 3 seconds. Then, "Baker 6 Echo, you're telling me you used a piece of broken glass to paint that Panzer for me?" "Affirmative, Iron Duke." "Son, I don't know whether to recommend you for a medal or a psychological evaluation, but that was the goddamn smartest thing I've seen since we landed in France. Can you do it again? As long as we've got sun and glass, we can do it. Then I need you forward with Iron Duke for the rest of this advance. Colonel needs to know about this immediately." By 1800 hours that evening, Mitchell was standing in battalion headquarters, a commandeered farmhouse 3 miles behind the front lines, explaining his glass fragment technique to Colonel Robert Thompson, Captain James Dietrich, Battalion S3 Operations Officer, and Lieutenant Colonel Howard Strauss from 2nd Armored Division. The reaction was mixed. Colonel Thompson was intrigued but skeptical. "Private Mitchell, you're telling me that you can reliably mark concealed enemy armor positions using reflected sunlight?" "Yes, sir, under correct conditions." "Define correct conditions." "Daytime operations, clear or partially cloudy skies. Sun position between 0900 and 1700 hours. Forward observer within line of sight to both target and friendly armor. Target must be within reflective light range, approximately 500 yards maximum." Lieutenant Colonel Strauss from 2nd Armored crossed his arms. "That's a lot of conditions, Private. What happens when it's overcast? What happens at dawn or dusk? What happens when German smoke obscures the battlefield?" "Then it doesn't work, sir. But right now, we don't have any reliable method for marking concealed targets in real time. Artillery takes time. Radio communications are unreliable under fire. Forward observers can call in coordinates, but coordinates are only useful if the target stays put, and German armor doesn't stay put. This technique gives tank commanders instant visual target identification. It's not perfect, but it's better than what we have now." Captain Dietrich leaned forward. "How did you come up with this, Mitchell?" Mitchell hesitated, then told the truth. "I watched 3 Shermans burn this morning, sir. I watched tank crews die because they couldn't see the enemy until it was too late. Then I saw sunlight reflecting off broken glass in a farmhouse window, and I thought, what if we could use that?" Colonel Thompson was quiet for a long moment, studying Mitchell. Finally, "This is exactly the kind of practical, improvised solution we need. It's low-tech, requires no special equipment, can be implemented immediately, and leverages resources already available, sunlight and broken glass, both of which are abundant in Normandy. Captain Dietrich, I want this technique tested systematically. Assemble a volunteer team, train them, coordinate with attached armor, run controlled tests over the next 48 hours. If it works consistently, we implement it division-wide." Dietrich nodded. "Yes, sir. Mitchell, you're now attached to Battalion HQ as training cadre for this, what do we call it?" Mitchell thought for a second. "The glass fragment doctrine, sir." Strauss snorted. "You're going to call it that, officially?" "Why not?" Colonel Thompson said. "The British called radar radio detection and ranging and made it stick. If this works, it'll be the glass fragment doctrine. If it doesn't work, nobody will remember it anyway." Over the next 48 hours, Mitchell trained a team of 12 volunteers, infantry scouts and forward observers who already operated close to enemy lines. The training was simple: how to identify suitable glass fragments, size, reflectivity, durability, how to position for optimal reflection angles, how to maintain steady reflection on moving or stationary targets, how to communicate with tank commanders via radio, and how to break contact immediately after target engagement to avoid German counterfire. The team practiced in rear areas, using friendly tanks as practice targets. They discovered several critical refinements. Mirrors worked better than raw glass fragments, looted from farmhouses, vehicles, even German equipment caches. Multiple reflectors created redundant marking if one scout was forced to displace. Coordinated timing with tank movement was critical. Marking the target too early exposed the scout. Too late didn't give the tank crew time to acquire and fire. The scouts needed reliable radios with prearranged communication protocols to avoid confusion in combat. By June 15th, the glass fragment doctrine was ready for systematic combat testing. Mitchell and his trained team were attached to Company A, 2nd Battalion, 116th Infantry Regiment, supporting a planned advance towards St. Lo. Their mission: identify concealed German armor and mark targets for attached Sherman tanks using reflected light. June 16th and 20th, 1944. St. Lo Offensive Sector. The first German tank crew to die by the glass fragment doctrine never understood what killed them. Obergefreiter Klaus Richter, gunner in a Panzer IV attached to 17th SS Panzer Grenadier Division, was positioned in a well-concealed hull-down position overlooking a sunken road 3 kilometers northwest of St. Lo. His tank had been in that position for 6 hours, waiting for American armor to advance into the kill zone. German doctrine was patient, methodical, and brutally effective. Wait until enemy tanks were exposed and vulnerable. Fire first, displace immediately. Richter's tank commander, Oberfeldwebel Werner Braun, was a veteran of the Eastern Front with 11 confirmed American tank kills since D-Day. He was good at his job. His crew was disciplined, experienced, and confident. They'd destroyed 2 Shermans the previous day using exactly this tactic. At 11:15 hours, Richter was scanning through his periscope when Braun suddenly shouted, "Amerikaner Panzer, range 400 meters, prepare to fire." Richter traversed the turret, acquiring the target, a Sherman advancing cautiously along the sunken road. Perfect shot. The American crew clearly hadn't spotted the concealed Panzer. Richter prepared to fire. Then something strange happened. A bright spot of light, impossibly bright like concentrated sunlight, appeared directly on their camouflage netting. Richter blinked, momentarily blinded. Braun cursed in German, confused. "What is that light? Where is it coming from?" Before anyone could answer, the Sherman's turret traversed with mechanical precision, aiming directly at their position. Impossible. They were concealed. The Americans couldn't possibly have spotted them so quickly. The Sherman fired. The 75mm round punched through the Panzer's frontal armor at a weak point where improvised additional plating had been welded. The crew died instantly as ammunition detonated. Mitchell, positioned 200 yards away in a hedgerow, watched the Panzer explode. He lowered his mirror, a 6-inch square looted from a destroyed German Kubelwagen, and keyed his radio. "Iron Duke 2, Baker Scout 1, target destroyed, good shooting, moving to next position." Over the next 5 days, Mitchell's scout team marked 17 additional German tanks for destruction. The results were statistically unprecedented. June 16th, 4 Panzers destroyed, 0 friendly tank losses. June 17th, 3 Panzers destroyed, 1 Sherman damaged, non-fatal. June 18th, 5 Panzers destroyed, 0 friendly losses. June 19th, 4 Panzers destroyed, 0 friendly losses. June 20th, 5 Panzers destroyed, 0 friendly losses. Total, 21 German tanks destroyed in 5 days using the glass fragment doctrine, compared to an average sector loss ratio of 3.4 American tanks destroyed for every German tank killed using conventional tactics. Survival rates for Sherman crews in Mitchell's sector improved from 32% to 89%. American infantry casualties from German armor decreased by 67%. Advance rates tripled, the Wehrmacht noticed. German tactical intelligence reports from late June 1944 captured after the war show growing confusion and frustration. Report from 17th SS Panzer Grenadier Division, June 18, 1944. American tank crews are demonstrating unprecedented accuracy in locating and engaging concealed positions. Our standard camouflage and hull-down tactics are proving less effective. Unknown American tactical innovation suspected. Recommend enhanced counter-reconnaissance measures and more frequent displacement after engagement. Report from Panzerlehr Division, June 20, 1944. Confirmed reports from multiple tank commanders describe strange light reflections appearing on tank positions immediately prior to American engagement. Source of reflections unknown. Some crews report light appears to originate from American infantry positions forward of their armor. Possible new targeting system or coordination technique. Nature unclear. Recommend investigation. Report from German 7th Army Intelligence, June 22, 1944. Increasing reports of coordinated American armor infantry tactics resulting in abnormally high German tank losses in bocage terrain. American crews are acquiring and engaging concealed positions with accuracy inconsistent with their previous performance. Analysis suggests improved forward observer coordination, possibly enhanced optical equipment or radio communication protocols. No confirmed sightings of new equipment. Enemy tactical doctrine appears to have evolved significantly since initial landings. Countermeasures under development. The Germans never figured it out. The reason was simple. They were looking for technology. German military doctrine emphasized technical superiority, better tanks, better optics, better radios, better everything. The concept that American soldiers were using broken glass and sunlight, the most primitive optical signaling method imaginable, never occurred to Wehrmacht intelligence analysts. They assumed sophisticated new targeting equipment. They assumed advanced radio protocols. They assumed American industrial might had produced some new battlefield innovation that had been shipped to Normandy. They never assumed a private from Iowa had figured out how to use physics, geometry, and abundant free resources to turn concealed German armor into illuminated targets. Major Ernst Hoffmann, intelligence officer with Panzer Lehr Division, wrote in his personal diary on June 23rd, diary recovered after his capture in July, "We are losing tanks at an unacceptable rate in the hedgerow fighting. The Americans have developed some new system for marking our positions. Our tank commanders report lights, reflections, illuminations appearing on their vehicles moments before American tanks engage. We have captured no equipment. We have interrogated prisoners. They either don't know or won't talk. This is either brilliant innovation, or we are facing an enemy who has learned to use the simplest tools to defeat our most sophisticated weapons. I fear it's the latter. That terrifies me more than any American technical superiority." By June 25th, word of the glass fragment doctrine had spread through the U.S. First Army. Tank commanders requested trained scouts. Infantry battalions began implementing the technique independently. Training protocols were distributed. Soldiers scavenged mirrors from every available source. Farmhouses, vehicles, churches, even German equipment. The technique had limitations. Overcast days made it useless. Early morning and late afternoon reduced effectiveness. German smoke screens could obscure reflection, and scouts operating forward of friendly lines were always at extreme risk. But the mathematics were undeniable. German tank losses in sectors using the glass fragment doctrine were 340% higher than sectors using conventional tactics. American tank and infantry survival rates improved dramatically. The Wehrmacht adapted slowly, increasing use of smoke, more frequent displacement, enhanced counter-reconnaissance operations. But adaptation takes time, and time was something Germany didn't have in Normandy in summer 1944. August 25th, 1944. Saint-Lô, France. Victory and remembrance. When the Normandy campaign officially ended with the Allied breakout from the Bocage and the subsequent liberation of Paris, the statistical impact of the glass fragment doctrine was documented in official U.S. Army after-action reports. First Army Armored Operations Analysis, July-August 1944. Implementation of forward observer light reflection targeting techniques, unofficially designated glass fragment doctrine, resulted in measurable improvement in armor survivability and enemy engagement efficiency. Units employing trained scouts with reflective targeting equipment achieved 67% reduction in friendly armor losses and 340% increase in enemy armor destruction rates compared to control units using conventional targeting methods. Technique, effectiveness, limited by weather and visibility conditions, but represents significant tactical innovation requiring minimal resource investment. Recommend formal incorporation into infantry armor coordination doctrine for future operations. The numbers told a story of innovation born from desperation. Over the course of June-August 1944 in Normandy, Scout teams using the glass fragment doctrine were credited with marking targets that led to the destruction of 347 German tanks and assault guns. American tank crew casualties in sectors employing the technique dropped from 68% per destroyed tank to 23%. Infantry casualties from German armor decreased by 71%. Private First Class James Mitchell, the Iowa rifleman who started it all, was awarded the Silver Star on July 12, 1944, by General Omar Bradley personally. The citation read, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against the enemy, Private Mitchell demonstrated exceptional initiative and tactical innovation under combat conditions, developing and implementing a targeting technique that significantly enhanced armor effectiveness and preserved American lives. His actions exemplify the American soldier's capacity for creative problem-solving under extreme adversity." Mitchell survived the war. He fought through France into Germany and was present when American forces liberated Dachau concentration camp in April 1945. He returned to Cedar Rapids in December 1945, married his high school sweetheart, worked 40 years as a mechanical engineer at Collins Radio Company, and raised 4 children. He rarely spoke about the war. The glass fragment doctrine itself faded from military consciousness surprisingly quickly. Post-war doctrine focused on technological solutions, improved optics, thermal imaging, radar, laser designation, satellite targeting. The idea that soldiers had once used mirrors and sunlight to mark targets seemed quaint, primitive, almost embarrassing compared to the high-tech arsenals of the Cold War era. The technique was never formally incorporated into Army field manuals. Training protocols were discontinued. By 1950, most Army officers had never heard of it. Mitchell's role was almost entirely forgotten. In 1983, military historian Dr. Robert Capa was researching armor tactics in the Normandy campaign when he discovered references to light reflection targeting in declassified First Army documents. Intrigued, he began investigating. He found after-action reports. He found statistical analyses. He found Mitchell's Silver Star citation. He tracked Mitchell down in Cedar Rapids. The old soldier was 61 years old, retired, spending his time building furniture in his garage workshop. Dr. Capa interviewed him extensively. Mitchell's memory was precise, detailed, and matter-of-fact. It wasn't some genius breakthrough, it was just practical thinking. We had a problem. We couldn't see the enemy, but we could get close to them. We had tanks that could kill them if they knew where to shoot. The question was how to connect those two things. The glass fragments were just the answer. Anyone could have thought of it. I just happened to be the one holding broken glass when the idea clicked. Dr. Capa published his findings in Military History Quarterly in 1985. The article, titled "The Glass Fragment Doctrine: Forgotten Innovation in Normandy," brought Mitchell's story back into historical record. Other historians began examining the technique. Veterans who'd served in Normandy came forward with their own memories of using mirrors to mark targets. By the 1990s, the glass fragment doctrine was recognized as a significant example of battlefield innovation, not because it was technologically advanced, but because it perfectly embodied the American approach to warfare: practical, improvised, adaptable, and willing to embrace solutions that worked regardless of how unsophisticated they appeared. Modern military doctrine now emphasizes low-tech, high-impact solutions for irregular warfare environments where high technology may be unavailable or compromised. The glass fragment doctrine is taught at officer training schools as a case study in creative tactical thinking. James Mitchell died in 2003 at age 81. His obituary in the Cedar Rapids Gazette mentioned his Silver Star and his service in World War II, but said nothing about glass fragments or marked tanks. Most of his neighbors never knew what he'd done in France in 1944, but the tankers knew. Lieutenant Marcus Holloway, the Sherman commander who'd fired that first successful shot based on Mitchell's reflected light, survived the war and became a teacher in San Antonio. In a 1998 interview, aged 76, he said, "I owe my life to Jim Mitchell. We all do. Every tank crew that fought in those hedgerows after he figured out that trick with the mirrors. He saved hundreds of us, maybe thousands. And he did it with broken glass and sunlight and Iowa stubbornness. That's the American soldier right there. That's why we won." The glass fragment doctrine proved something fundamental about warfare and human ingenuity. The most effective weapons aren't always the most sophisticated. Sometimes the most powerful tool is the willingness to look at a problem from an entirely new angle, to use resources nobody else thought were resources, to refuse to accept that the way things have always been done is the only way to do them. Mitchell's innovation didn't come from advanced training or superior technology. It came from watching friends die, feeling helpless, and refusing to stay helpless. It came from looking at broken glass on a farmhouse floor and seeing not trash but possibility. In 1944, in the hedgerows of Normandy, that possibility became 21 destroyed German tanks. It became hundreds of American soldiers who came home alive because someone they'd never meet had figured out how to turn sunlight into a weapon. That's the legacy of the glass fragment doctrine. Not the technique itself, which became obsolete within a generation, but the principle behind it, that ordinary people facing impossible odds can find extraordinary solutions if they're willing to think differently. James Mitchell from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, never thought of himself as extraordinary. He thought of himself as someone who'd done what needed doing with what was available. That perhaps more than any statistic or citation explains why America prevailed in World War II. If this story of American ingenuity, determination, and battlefield innovation moved you, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because history is full of forgotten heroes whose creativity and courage changed the course of the war. Drop a comment below. What forgotten innovation from WTIT amazes you most? And check out our next video where we explore another incredible story of American soldiers who refused to accept defeat. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the greatest weapons are the simplest ideas in the hands of determined people.